Helldivers 2 is taking over the gaming world right now, and for a good reason too. The loot and shooter is one of the most fun games we've played in recent times. But, as I'm sure you're aware, the game isn't for the faint of heart, as it really doesn't give you much guidance and kind of chucks you in the deep end to work things out. That's what we're here for though, as we'll break down the best build for each enemy type, and stick around until the end, as we'll give you the best all-around build for any mission type. The Terminids and Automatons can be absolute menaces, but worry not soldier, with this build, you'll be dominating them in no time. So let's get into it. This build is specifically for Terminids, making you both agile and providing enough anti-armor options to breeze through them. The Terminids are the bug faction of Helldivers 2 and are split into 8 different types, along with 3 special boss type enemies, the Brood Commanders, Chargers, and Bio-Titans. The bug faction are tricky little buggers, as some of them are extremely agile while others are heavily armored, so you really need to have a solid build to overcome them. Your primary weapon will be the SG-225 Breaker, a reliable, low maintenance automatic shotgun, perfect for quickly taking out unarmored targets and handy for close encounters. Your secondary weapon will be the P19 Redeemer, as it easily takes down large groups of enemies with a high fire rate and a low recoil. This weapon can also be used when you're carrying objectives with your other hand, making it a literal lifesaver. We'll go with the G10 Incendiary Grenade. Yes, you'll be giving up damage and armor penetration, but this is perfect for Terminid swarms, as the incendiary effect will continue to damage groups of enemies even after you've thrown it. With regards to armor, we need to stay light on our feet, so we'll go with the light armor for this build. This armor provides increased mobility and has a much lower chance of spooking nearby enemies. And considering the Terminids hunt in packs and are extremely quick, we need to be ready to retreat and regather ourselves when swarmed, making this the obvious choice. Now, let's break down the stratagems, as these are arguably the most important part of any build. To kick things off, we'll bring the railgun. While we want to stay mobile, we still need an option for taking out the heavily armored boss Terminids, making this the perfect aid. The railgun has a short charge before firing and will easily penetrate through heavily armored enemies. The Guard Dog Rover is extremely useful, especially if you're taking some of those missions on solo, as this autonomously attacks groups of enemies while you're running away in fear. The Rover is the best option over the standard Guard Dog stratagem, as it comes equipped with a laser rifle and excels at taking down much stronger enemies. Just be careful though, this little AI is an absolute menace when it comes to friendly fire, as its shooting pattern is wild and often can down teammates who cross its path. Just something to keep in mind. Fire and explosions are your best friends against the Terminids, which is why we're going with the Mortar Sentry for our next stratagem. This is the perfect option for weakening enemy bases at range and disposing of enemies closely grouped together, something the Terminids are notorious for. The Mortar Sentry is best used to ambush the base before you dive in head first, with the added bonus of avoiding the dreaded friendly fire. And our final stratagem for this build will be the Orbital Rail Cannon Strike. This works perfectly in tandem with the Mortar Sentry, as this will clear out the lesser enemies, allowing the Orbital Rail Cannon Strike to focus on the boss types. Upon throwing the beacon down, the laser will begin to track down the largest enemy and turn it to complete dust. Goes without saying, but save this for when you really need it. Don't waste it on a large group of lesser enemies. Don't forget to add a booster too. With this mobile build, you'll want to choose the stamina enhancement. With the Terminid build completed, let's move on to probably the most annoying enemy type in the game, the Automatons. Automatons are a much more formidable foe than the Terminids, mainly due to the weapons at their disposal, so we will need the right build to tackle them. Heavy armor is a must, along with defensive stratagems and armor-piercing weapons, so let's get into the build. The Automaton build relies more on heavy armor and EMS abilities to combat the robots, so we'll start with an AR-23P Liberator Penetrator as our primary. Don't be fooled though, just because it's a starter weapon, it packs a serious punch. With a low recoil and large fire rate, this will do quite nicely. We'll keep the P19 Redeemer as our secondary, and we'll switch grenades up and take the G16 Impact instead. This is super useful, as it has a 0-second fuse timer, while still having the same damage and penetration values as the G12 High Explosive Grenade. Trust us, the bots move very quickly. A 0-second fuse timer on a grenade is invaluable. As mentioned, we want heavy armor, so equip the Heavy Democracy Protects option to keep you safe. Now, onto the stratagems, and this is by far the most important part of this build. The autocannon is a massive weapon and can absolutely decimate both Terminids and Automatons in seconds. Just be careful though, it has a huge weapon sway, as do most heavy weapons in this game. Next, we have the Mortar Sentry, which is perfect for damaging enemy bases from afar before diving in. The Mortar Sentry is best used against areas where the enemies are close together, so make sure to get the most bang for your buck. This stratagem is probably the most important in this build, as the EMS Mortar Sentry is super effective against electronic enemies. The EMS Mortar Sentry not only fires shells, but also emits a static field, slowing down enemies and making them vulnerable. With this in mind, it's best to pair it with another sentry, allowing the EMS to do its work while the other finishes the enemies off. And the final stratagem in this build is the big boy, as it's the Eagle 500 kg bomb. Probably the most fun to use in the game once the beacon is thrown. This will absolutely destroy anything in its area. As you can imagine, it has an extremely high recharge rate, so you do have to use this with caution. Ideally, save it for the big bosses, or at the very least, use it on a large concentration of enemies. As this is pretty much a tank build, for the booster, we're going to go with the Vitality enhancement. Now, because we're generous over here at GG Recon, we'll give you a bonus all-around build, quick-fire style, so be ready. Our primary is the SG225 Breaker, secondary is the P19 Redeemer, G10 is the Incendiary as the grenade, we'll have a medium Democracy Protects armor, the stratagems will consist of the Railgun, Shield Generator Pack, Autocannon Sentry, and the Eagle Cluster Bomb, with the Stamina enhancement wrapping things up. Go forth, soldier, take back the planets, and you can thank us later, but while we've got your attention, go check out this Helldivers 2 video.